Okay, this is a detail pass, and this is going to happen later in the semester, but just so you guys sort of understand where some of this can go, we keep looking at these detail sort of pieces, and people ask me, how do I add grime around the edges of something if I'm using tiled textures? Well, this is how we do it. So here's my grime strips. Now these are tileable right to left, but they're meant to be individual strips, so I could have different ones. Now I could also channel pack these like we've discussed a bit, where my RGB channels are different ones. I haven't done that in this case. And so they're just straight up 4 strips. I've got a normal map for it that I generated out of normalize, and of course I painted these in Krita so I could tile them side to side. They're exactly 1/4 of the size of the texture space each. They are not bigger or smaller or random sizes. They're exactly 1/4 of the texture size each. This is going to make my life easy over in Unreal when I set this up. So over in Max, we're going to head to first. We need to make our texture strip. So this is our texture strip. It's a plane. And I've given mine some vertices. You don't need to. You could give it 0 verts if you want. It really wouldn't matter. You could do it like this. And if you're not going to do one of my steps, I'm going to make mine able to blend in where like I'm going to have it sort of additive. So if I want to remove the the grime in spots, I can blend vertex colors into the vertices to blend into that map itself, into the grayscale map. So I'll be able to blend them in and out where I want as well, just by painting on them. But I haven't got there, and I'm not going to cover that this time around. That's sort of a more advanced methodology. Now, if you notice, my UV space probably doesn't make a lot of sense. I haven't bothered unwrapping this. It's just as it is as a plane. You can see all 4 of them are jammed in top to bottom, and you might want to go unwrap it. Don't, okay? You're going to see why. The other thing I did is, if you take a look at the pivot here, and I'll just hit insert, and you can see it's slightly below the surface. I just bumped it just a touch below the surface, and you'll see why I do that in a minute as well, because it's going to be easier when we put it in there. So I bumped it down a little bit. I'm going to export this sucker so it's exported out, and using my tool so I don't have to center it manually. Over in Unreal Engine, I have my grime strip. Now it already has a texture on it, but we're going to start again, and we're going to add this in. So there's my grime strip, and here's what it looks like being used. So look at my top edge of the bridge here, and I got these nice grime strips. Now all it is a strip of polygons being added and stuck on the surface. So that's literally all it is. It's just this grime strip that's been added, and I can just drop it wherever I want, wherever I need a strip of grime. Okay. So I've got a material instance that allows me to be able to play around with settings and whatnot. But what we're going to do then is we're going to go make our own material up. I'm going to simplify it a little bit from what I've got, because I'm making mine a little fancier. So I'm just going to go down to my demo materials. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say material, and we're going to call this M underscore I'm going to just call this a generic name again. So detail, I don't know, strips, because I don't know what it's going to be, because the material instance will get called the correct thing. And obviously pen underscore pen in there. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to need a couple textures to begin with. So down to my textures here, and somewhere in here I have those grime strips. There they are there. And so I'm going to need a couple here. I'm just going to pull this off and do it this way. So I'm going to need a couple things. One, I'm going to make it rust to begin with. I'm going to need my grime strips. I'm going to need the normals for the grime, and I'm going to need the normals for the rust at least to get this going. So let's just spread this out. We'll do this step by step. Let's grab these for now. And so the first one's going to be really easy. I'm going to take my, you know, my texture here, and I'm just going to plug it straight in to begin with. So that's just going to be my base color to begin with. And we're going to want to be able to dial this up and down so that we can manipulate the size of it because we don't know that it's going to be tiled enough. So as I've shown before, U for our texture coordinates. I'm going to go M for our multiply node so I can multiply the texture coordinates up and down. This one's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to hold down 1 and create 2 constant values. Okay. And we're going to plug those into B because the texture coordinates are actually giving us U, V, and W coordinates. We want to be able to multiply U and V separately. Well, there's no 2 inputs into B to do that. Okay, if we plug 1 in, we're only going to be multiplying U, V, and W by a single value. So they're all going to change at the same time. We want to make a vector out of this. So we're going to right click and we're going to say vector, what is it? Oh, append vector. What am I doing? Sorry, right click and append vector. Not append many, but append vector. An append vector allows us to be able to take what is one value and turn it into basically an X and Y or U and V or R and G value. Okay, so there's the 2 values going to get input into here. We're going to multiply those. Now we want to be able to start at a value of 1 on each of these. So I'm going to set them both to 1. And I'm going to right click on both, convert to parameter. And we're going to call these tile, whoops, come on. Tile diffuse U. And then we'll call this one V. And we'll plug those into the UV coordinates. So the 1-to-1 tiling that we've currently got set up there, the multipliers of 1 and 1 will not change it whatsoever. So it's going to be the same setup. So that's going to be nice. We'll be able to tile up and down our UV coordinates as we see fit to be able to make it larger or smaller. Because right now in mine, I haven't done that. So the actual rust texture is being stretched heavily across it. And it's probably not going to look so good. So we're going to need to be able to control that. Now the next thing we need to be able to do is plug this into the opacity channel. So we're going to take the RGB output instead of, again, some of you have heard about channel packing. So, but I've just got RGB here and I'm going to plug it into opacity. But if you notice, the opacity is grayed out. This shader currently can't handle opacity. That's so that it is as optimized as possible. Most shaders you use, you don't need to have opacity in it. So we need to turn that on. So with the shader itself selected, we're going to come down to blend mode, and where it says opaque here, we're going to change it to translucent. And then that opacity channel becomes available to us. So with that available to us, you can see now it becomes transparent. Now let's put this onto a box or a plane, which would make more sense. And you can see that we have this tiled as it did before. So it's tiled just like on our plane back in Max. It's, you know, all 4 up and down. So we're gonna have to correct that and set some things up to make that work. But this is good so far. There's opacity. Now, if you also notice, we can't plug in our normal map. So our normal map has to be able to plug in. And where we change that is we roll down below where we set the translucent into the next one down where it says translucency. We need to go and change how it's going to calculate it. Each one of these essentially gets more complex in calculations as we go up. Volumetric non-directional is the default, meaning it doesn't look at it on a per pixel basis and try and calculate the angle of the pixels. We need that volumetric directional. So we're going to turn that on and it's going to give us our normal channel. So we'll be able to plug stuff in with normals. We're going to hold off on those for a minute and come back to those normals, okay, and get them working. First, we need to be able to control this better and get it so there's only one of these strips across here. Once again, that's going to be our UV coordinates. Here's our UV coordinates, so we can use those again. We're going to need a multiply node. And we're going to plug in to the multiply node. We're going to need another append vector. So we can look for that again and get our append vector because we want to be able to tile it top to bottom, not left to right. So once again, we're also going to need 2 constant values and we're going to plug those in. The first one is going to be defaulted to a value of 1. Then we're going to convert that to a parameter, and we're going to call this um, tile opacity in U, and set it to a value of 1 because we're multiplying. We don't want to change it to start with. And we're going to change this. Whoop, that was kind of funky. Tile opacity V. And this one, however, we could start at a value of 1 if you wanted when we plug this in. So let's plug this in so we see the results. And let's actually just view just this texture sample so you can see it. I want to start previewing nodes so you can see it. So up and down, what I want to do is I want to tile it to the point where I only see one of those, and that's going to be a value of 0.25 in this case, because we have 4 of them. So if you divide 4 into UV space that's 1 to 1, 1 divided by 4 is 0.25, okay, 1/4 of the size. So you can see that we've got that that 1 now at the top. That 1 strip is on there. So we're going to be able to change this to be able to pick up the one we want. Now we want to be able to offset it. We want to be able to slide it up and down, top to bottom, so that we can pick up any one of the strips that we want. That's going to be additive. So left click, and we're going to plug into it again. And then we're going to be able to add to this. Again, we're going to need this sort of setup again. So I'm just going to grab this and go Control W, and it'll copy them. Why Control W is copy, I have no idea, but it is. Now this one's going to be offset U, and this one is going to be offset V. Okay, and so if I take this now with this offset, which is set to 0.25, I'm going to set it to 0. And we've got 1 on there. If we set it to 0.5, I've offset it halfway down the map. If I offset it to 0.75, I'm grabbing the bottom one. So if you consider that in our map, 0 is the top, 0.25, 0.5, and 0.75 down our map, okay? 1 would just get us right back to the beginning again. So we're just going to use these offsets. So I can default it whatever to I want. I'm going to default it to 0. And the offset is going to be a value of 0 as well, because when you're additive, 0 added to something is whatever you added it to. So we just want to leave them as 0 to begin with. So we're defaulting those. So I'm just going to stop previewing here. Okay. And now we've got these inputs to be able to control this strip. And so I'm going to hit apply. And I'm going to come back to my level where I've got my material demos. And again, you should be putting your material instances into your material instances. I want to find that, what was it again? Detail strips, I think I called it. And I'm going to say create instance. And so let's change the name of this. So MI, and we'll call this, whatever. I'll just leave it as the detail strips right now. So let's go and apply it to our bits of metal. So I'm going to go over to my metal, and I'm going to look for the detail strips material instance here. Okay. So if I open the material instance for this, and we'll just put it down lower here, we can set this up as we like. So we've got the tiling and the opacity, tile opacity U and V. So now you're going to be able to see that we can go about changing these up as we want. The tile V, opaque V, we don't want to change. We know that multiply it by 0.25 to get all 4. But the tile opaque V offset, you can see that we can slide it into place, knowing that if we type in those exact values, 0, 0.25, 0.5, and 0.75, we can pick up whichever part of that strip that we're looking for, okay? So those are going to allow us to be able to pick those up any way that we're looking for. I'm just going to leave it on a value of 0 and just keep it turned off. So now we want to be able to plug in our normal maps as well. Let's push that off to the side. We want to be able to blend these together, and we're going to need to be able to mask them. So I'm going to use a lerp node. Not an exact way of doing it, but we're going to live with the non-exact way so I don't confuse you too much. And I need to mask out the second one on top of the first one. So I'm going to take the output of this and use it as a mask so that they're masked properly, and one's masking the other, so it's actually laying it on top. And we're going to plug that into the normal. Now, of course, we may also want to be able to control the normal, so we can put the flattened normal in here if you wanted. So now I'm going to have normals on this. Now let me show you how to place them in the scene for when you get there. So I'll just delete this one that I've got and get rid of it out of the scene. So normally what you'd want to do is snap it onto the surface. Now surface snapping is on by default in Unreal. So when we drag and drop something, it'll drop it right onto it. Let me go back up and find my miscellaneous where I put it, and I drag and drop it into the scene, and you can see how it's put it on an angle here. Pivots in the middle, and it's not what we're looking for. So I specifically made it with the Z pointing up in Max. I'm just going to delete that. And I'm going to go turn on this button up here where the move snap is, the rotate snap and whatnot. And right beside it is this one. I'm going to open that up and it's going to say surface snapping. Rotate to surface normal, surface offset we could have used, but we offset the pivot point. So watch what happens now. I can drop it onto the surface and it will stick onto the surface wherever we put it. So it's now snapped in place. I'm making sure that I'm using my local rotate button here. Okay, so changing it off the world, and so I can also move it and I can scale it. And so I'll just scale it so we don't see the ends and scale it this way so it's bigger. And now I've got rust. Now you can see that my rust texture is being stretched heavily. So let's go back and grab our texture here. Whoops, wrong one. I want let's just open it this way. Material instance. Oh, it's on my other screen. That's why. There we go. Wondering where it went. And we can go about scaling this now. So we can say tile U, and this is the diffuse texture. So you can see that it's tiling, and we can make it a better size. We could also go in and tile the opacity as well if we wanted to make more or less of those strips kind of thing, little sort of drips coming down. And it doesn't affect the underlying diffuse texture because it's being tiled separately. So we can get it the right size and work with there. So this size strip now will work with this material instance. If we wanted different settings, we just simply make another material instance of the original material and set it up however we want. So I could change this instead of detail strips, large rust strip, long rust strip, something like that, bridge rust strip. So I can make as many of these material instances as I'm going to need. Now I could also go ahead and do the offset if I want some different type of rust. So I could say 0.25 and move it up, and there's a different rust. It's a denser rust. It doesn't have those drippy lines in it. I could go and take it down to the 1 at 0.75, and I've got that line rust. That'd be good for in between the gaps of things or something. And you kind of want rust that looks like it's going up and down a little bit. So that would work nicely for that one as well. I'm just going to leave it on 0. And so there you go. I've got rust that is dripping down on that bridge. I can copy that to wherever I need it now, and I have rust. So the next one we might want to do is just expose some more of the textures. We could expose the rust texture as a parameter so that we could change it out here and we could make it into whatever we want. Doesn't need to be rust. It could be dirt. It could be other kinds of grime and whatnot. So go ahead and expose this as well, and you'll even have more control over it. We'll call this just diffuse texture. And now this will now show up as a texture that can be changed in material instances. We could do that with all of them if we wish. Obviously, this would need to be added as well so that we can drag and drop those and customize our material instance. There's some optimized texturing for you.